If you'd told me a year ago that I'd be standing on my own porch, coffee in one hand, bourbon in the other, watching federal agents turn my pond into a crime scene, while a suburban HOA staged a Sacred Waters protest like it was Coachella for people who own clipboards, I would have laughed so hard I'd have swallowed a bug. But that's Texas for you. One day you're fixing a windmill and cussing at a bolt that's been stuck since the Carter administration. The next day you're in a full-blown land war because somebody's Facebook group decided your property feels like it belongs to them. I've lived on this land my whole life, 180 acres of stubborn sun-baked dirt, a couple barns with good bones, and a spring-fed pond big enough that folks like to call it a little lake when they're trying to be poetic. That pond was dug out by my great-granddad back in 1928, and it's fed by two natural streams that fall under water rights I've had stamped, verified, confirmed, and blessed by more agencies than I can pronounce without getting tired. I'm not a sentimental guy, but I'm protective. Not because I'm greedy, because land isn't just something you own, it's something you're responsible for. It's fence lines and paperwork and sweat and busted knuckles. It's the quiet you earn after a long day. And I don't take kindly to people who look at it like it's a public park waiting for a ribbon cutting. Which is exactly what happened the morning Karen Childers walked up to my fence like she'd already named the place. It was a Thursday, because of course it was. Nothing dramatic ever happens on a relaxing Tuesday. I remember the day because my windmill had jammed again, and I was out there with grease on my hands, talking to a piece of metal like it could feel shame, when I saw her coming up the gravel easement. Blonde bob, sunglasses the size of satellite dishes, a fleece vest zipped up way too high for a Texas spring, and a tablet hugged to her chest like it contained the 10 Commandments and her Pinterest board. She didn't wave, didn't hesitate, just marched right up like she had a court order in her back pocket and a head full of confidence from a weekend seminar titled How to Get Your Way by Smiling Harder. "Good morning," she said, bright as a porch light. "Are you the property caretaker?" Caretaker. Like I was the hired help. I wiped my hands on my jeans and gave her a look. "No ma'am," I said. "I'm the owner. Name's Sam." Her smile didn't change, just tightened a little, the way a rubber band tightens right before it snaps. She stuck out a manicured hand. "Karen Childers. I'm president of the Silver Timber Ranch Homeowners Association." That name, Silver Timber Ranch, rang a bell. New development over to the east. Opened last fall. Used to be pasture, then it got chopped up into planned conservation living, with matching mailboxes and little signs about native landscaping, while the actual natives, armadillos, coyotes, and me just watched it happen. "Oh," I said. "That place." Karen nodded like she'd been waiting for applause. "We're very focused on shared green space, community recreation, preserving the pastoral character of the landscape." I looked down at her expensive hiking boots, already caked in my red clay. "Well," I said, "you found pastoral." She didn't laugh. Not even a fake one. Instead, she tapped her tablet like a preacher thumping a Bible. "We're assessing local natural resources," she said, "and your pond falls within the visual corridor of our western walking trail. A lot of our residents have been asking about access, since it really feels like a community lake." I blinked once slow, like my brain needed time to decide if that sentence was real. Then she hit me with it. "We were hoping you'd be willing to discuss removing the perimeter fence and granting guest access on weekends," she said, like she was asking to borrow a cup of sugar. I stared at her, then stared at my fence, then stared at her again. "You want HOA folks," I said carefully, "to use my private pond." "Yes," she said, all pleasant. "Low-impact activities. Kayaking, bird watching, maybe light swimming." I let the silence hang there for a beat, because sometimes silence does the insulting for you. I said. "That's a hard no." Karen's smile did this weird thing. It stayed on her face, but her eyes got colder. "Perhaps you didn't understand," she said, voice still polite, tone now sharpened. "It's very common in conservation communities to integrate natural features into shared use agreements. We even have a model liability waiver." That's when I felt the switch flip in my chest, the one that goes from polite neighbor to do not test me. "Ma'am," I said, "this pond was dug by my great-grandfather. Those streams are under my registered water rights, confirmed by the state of Texas and the Bureau of Land Management. That fence is legal. The no trespassing signs are legal. And nobody swims in that pond unless I say so." I leaned a little closer and smiled, just to be friendly. Which I don't. She looked like I'd slapped her with a live catfish. "That's disappointing," she said, stiff. Yeah, I said. Life's full of that. She nodded like she was taking notes for a future revenge plot. We prefer to resolve things cooperatively, she said. But you should be aware your fencing crosses the unofficial easement line that many locals believe is part of the old grazing trail. I laughed, one short, ugly bark. History don't mean squat without documentation, I said. And I've got enough paperwork to bury a lawyer. Her lips pinched into that tight HOA smile. She turned on her heel and marched away, dust kicking off her boots like a warning shot. I watched her go and thought, well, that was annoying. And then something deeper in me, some old instinct, went nope. That's not over. That woman isn't walking away. She's circling. Sure enough, a week later, I got the first letter. White envelope. Embossed. Fancy logo, swirly trees, and rustic elegance, like they'd ordered it from a catalog called Pretend Country. Inside was a neatly folded notice on thick paper that probably cost more than half the HOA board's childhoods. Notice of violation and environmental impact concern. I read it leaning against my truck, and I swear the air got hotter just from my blood pressure. They claimed my fence was visually disruptive to their nature corridor. They suggested I was blocking access to a communal natural resource. They used phrases like historically unregulated and ecological landmark subject to community oversight, like the pond was some mystical spa spring that belonged to the people. Then they listed recommended corrective actions: remove the fence, install a shared-use footpath, attend their HOA meeting so we could collaboratively explore easement integration. I read it twice, then laughed so hard I almost dropped my coffee. Not because it was funny, because it was insane. Bureaucratic insanity, the kind that wears khakis and says just circling back. That same day I scanned it and emailed it to my attorney, Sarah Jenkins, a no-nonsense property rights lawyer who once made a judge cry in open court, and I'm not exaggerating, I watched it happen. She called me 10 minutes later. Sam, she said, this is absolute nonsense. Thought so, I said. I'm drafting a cease and desist, she said. Post it at the trailhead entrance too. These people are fishing for gray areas. I grinned. They're poking the wrong bear. The next few days stayed quiet, until Sunday morning when I spotted 3 people walking the inside edge of my southern fence line with clipboards, matching tan vests, and the kind of confidence you only get when you've never had to fix your own plumbing. One of them was recording on his phone. I walked over calm, shotgun cradled in my arm, not loaded, just persuasive. People misunderstand Texas sometimes, but we do have a language out here that doesn't require yelling. You folks need something? I asked. Clipboard guy jumped like I'd appeared out of thin air. Oh, we're conducting an environmental audit of the shared corridor space adjacent to community boundaries. You're on my land, I said flat. Well, the trail path is mapped as semi-public access per our Greenway initiative. I pointed at the no trespassing sign 6 feet away. Your initiative is not law, I said. That sign's been there since before you folks knew which county you were moving to. They started backing up immediately, muttering. The woman tried to explain something about bird migration and wildlife passage, but my patience had already walked off. The only thing migrating, I said, is your nonsense back across my property line. They left. That evening I got letter number 2, longer, more self-important, full of obscure zoning references, and a blurry map that looked like somebody had dragged the HOA boundary line over my land with a shaky mouse and a dream. I didn't laugh this time. I went into my back room, opened my old fireproof cabinet, things older than me, and started laying out deeds, land patents, water rights, BLM certificates, maps stamped by the state and feds and whoever else had ever had jurisdiction over anything out here. I spread them across my dining table like I was preparing for war, because I was. I wrote them a letter back, clear, factual, stacked with citations, sent it certified, ended it with, any further intrusion will be treated as harassment and referred to the sheriff and legal counsel. I figured that would shut them up. I figured wrong. Tuesday morning, 7:15, heavy knocking on my front door, the kind of knock that says badge and paperwork. I opened it and found 2 deputies on my porch, hands resting on their belts, cruiser parked crooked across my gravel. Morning, the older one said. You Sam Ratliff? I am, I said. What's this about? The younger one looked at his clipboard, then right at me. We received a formal complaint from Silver Timber Ranch HOA regarding alleged unlawful occupation of land and waterway usage. I blinked. Come again? The older deputy shifted awkwardly. They're claiming you're occupying a tract of land, and a pond reclassified by the HOA as a community access natural resource. I stared at them so hard I swear the air got thinner. "You're telling me," I said, "some suburban paper pushers redrew my property lines on a tablet, and now you're here about it?" "We're not evicting you," the older one said quickly. "We need to see documentation." "Oh," I said, stepping back inside. "You want documentation?" I came back with a folder so thick it could have stopped a bullet. Deed notarized in 1942. Federal land patent. State-verified water use rights. Laminated topo map with bold parcel lines. I laid it out on the porch railing like I was dealing cards. The older deputy flipped through it slow. The younger one stepped off the porch and made a call, low voice, a lot of verified coordinates, and not enforceable. 15 minutes later, they came back looking like men who wished they'd never heard the words Homeowners Association. "It appears there's no legal standing," the younger one said stiffly. "We'll file a report noting you have clear title." I folded my arms. "Appreciate it. Next time somebody makes up fantasy laws about my land, maybe knock a little quieter." They left, dust spinning behind them. And not 30 seconds later, like a movie cue, a white SUV rolled up near the trailhead. Karen, sunglasses on, watching. She didn't get out, just sat there like a villain in a minivan. I raised my coffee cup to her, cheers, and went back inside. That night someone sent me a screenshot from the HOA Facebook group. Karen posted, "Unfortunately, local enforcement is unwilling to act. Mr. Ratliff has chosen confrontation over cooperation. We will continue exploring alternate options for ensuring public access. The pond is for all of us." And that's when the real trouble started. First it was tire tracks near the southern fence line. Then I found an orange kayak on my bank like somebody had dropped it off for a rental service. Crushed beer box, chip bags, lawn chair under a tree. And out on the water, 2 teenage boys in life vests paddling like it was summer camp. I didn't yell. I didn't storm down there. I went back inside, checked my cameras, and watched footage of people slipping through the tree line at midnight with headlamps and coolers. No hesitation. No guilt. Like they'd done it before. I drove to the sheriff's office, filed an incident report. The desk deputy, young guy who looked like he'd rather be swallowed by the earth, listened and then hit me with the most infuriating sentence in the English language. "Well, technically," he said, "without a clearly posted perimeter and documented instances of prior disputes, it's hard to treat this as criminal trespass, especially if the HOA is claiming historical community use. You may want civil court." I stared at him. "So because I didn't line the pond with razor wire, it's a free-for-all?" He raised his hands. "Not saying it's right. Just saying it's tricky." By noon, 7 cars were parked on the easement like it was a tailgate. Bluetooth speaker blasting country pop. A folding table with a charcuterie board, because of course there was. Toddlers in water wings. Grown men unloading canoes like they were settling in for a long weekend. I walked up to a bald guy dragging a 2-man canoe out of his truck. "Mind telling me what you're doing?" I asked. He didn't even flinch. Karen said it's fine. Community lake. Community lake, I repeated like tasting poison. "You're on private property." He pulled up his phone, scrolling like it was gospel. She posted a map. Said this used to be public grazing land, legacy usage. "That's Facebook law," I snapped. "Try that in court." He shrugged and kept unloading. That's when I realized this wasn't confusion. This was entitlement with a smile. I called the sheriff again. Deputy Taylor came out, older, more reasonable. He walked the property, watched the footage, nodded. Then he said quiet, "Unless they refuse to leave when you ask directly, it stays in a gray area. And if they're misinformed." "They're not misinformed," I said. "They're bold." He sighed. "Then you need to take it higher." So I did. That night I installed 4 new cameras, posted new signs in 3 languages, and I made a call I hadn't made in years, to Marcy Ruiz from the Bureau of Land Management. Back when I did water engineering contracts, she was the kind of person who could bring hell in a folder. She picked up on the first ring. "Sam Ratliff," she said. "You stirring up dust again?" "Not yet," I said. "But I'm real close." By Friday the pond looked like a battlefield dressed up for a family reunion. Pool noodle floating like a sad little flag. Teen boys doing cannonballs off a rotten stump that I knew wasn't safe. A woman in yoga pants doing Tai Chi like she owned the sunrise. A man fishing in a Hawaiian shirt giving bait tips to strangers. Nobody looked confused. They looked invited. I got on a video call with Marcy. She listened, eyes narrowing, then said, "Send me everything, deeds, maps, coordinates, footage. If they're misrepresenting jurisdiction over federally recognized land, this escalates fast." I overnight a thumb drive stuffed with documents, HOA letters, camera footage, evidence of erosion, crushed vegetation, trash, noise, everything. By Monday I got a call from Field Agent Thomas Baird, U.S. Fish and Wildlife. He sounded like a man who doesn't do drama, he does consequences. "We saw photos of a soft-shell turtle nest trampled near the inlet," he said. "This area is a habitat corridor. Unauthorized activity can be federal wildlife disturbance. We're dispatching a team." Tuesday afternoon, 3 government SUVs rolled up my drive like the end of a bad party. Agents in khakis and hats came out with clipboards, cameras, soil sample kits. They walked the pond, photographed damage, interviewed me, reviewed footage. Then Baird looked at me and said, "You have clear federal water rights. Property is outside HOA jurisdiction. We've documented potential violations of wildlife protection laws from unpermitted recreational use." I nodded, tired. Glad somebody finally sees it. He wasn't done. The HOA board voted last week to include the pond in their recreation zone in an updated charter submitted to the county. I felt cold spread through my chest. "So they filed paperwork claiming my land?" His face hardened. "It's looking like falsification." And that was the twist. Up until then, this was annoying, infuriating, a suburban circus. But forgery? Misrepresenting land registry filings? That's not HOA nonsense, that's felony territory. By Thursday morning, my pond had orange federal boundary markers and laminated notices stapled to posts, big, shiny, official warnings in the sun. Motion-activated sirens at the trailhead. Signs that basically said, "If you trespass here, you're not just annoying Sam, you're annoying the federal government." You'd think that would end it. Karen didn't think. Karen performed. Mid-morning, a crowd gathered at the trail edge. Lawn chairs, binoculars, one guy with a drone hovering like it was filming a nature documentary called The Evil Rancher and the Sacred Kayak. Karen stood front and center in a coral blouse, arms crossed, shouting across the field, "This is overreach. You can't claim natural water is private. This is environmental greed." I held up the federal notice like a trophy. She screamed, "That pond was used for decades by this community." I yelled back, "Your HOA has existed for 14 months. Someone called me a government snitch. Some guy named Chad, board member, personal injury lawyer energy, started yelling about water table legislation. I told him I'd heard he failed the bar twice, and the crowd made the kind of sound people make when a balloon pops. Then Karen announced, loud enough for the drone, "We do not recognize federal interference. We will continue using the pond starting now." And she waved her arm like a Roman emperor. 2 teens stepped forward with inner tubes, one guy dragging a cooler. Click. The motion sensor beeped. And like the universe had impeccable comedic timing, a black SUV rolled up my drive. Out stepped Agent Baird with 2 federal officers behind him, calm as Sunday morning, faces sharp. "Ma'am," Baird said, "you've been informed in writing. Use of this land without authorization violates federal code. You are in breach of a federal order." Karen puffed up. "I have rights." Baird didn't blink. "No, ma'am. You have a lawsuit." 10 minutes later, they were taking names, issuing citations, and ordering people off my land. The crowd dispersed like ants under a magnifying glass. Karen was the last to go, red-faced, muttering like her mouth couldn't accept reality. That night I got an envelope, no stamp, hand-delivered spite. Inside, an emergency HOA declaration encouraging peaceful protest by continued use of shared natural space, including kayaking, meditation, children's swimming lessons, and, "This is real," sunset wine gatherings. I laughed so hard I had to sit down. Then Saturday morning, I woke up to chanting. Not coyotes, not cows, chanting, wind chimes, and what sounded like a steel drum being played by someone who had never heard of rhythm. I walked onto my porch with coffee and almost choked. There were tents, 8, arranged like a half-moon on my bank. A handmade sign staked into the ground, Sacred Waters Community Reflection Zone, respect, not repression. Dream catchers hanging from pine branches. An elderly woman in tie-dye leading meditation about reclaiming natural spaces from patriarchal enclosure. Someone burning sage near my old fire pit. A kid playing with a plastic sword inside a chalk circle around the turtle nest. And there, of course, Karen, wearing a wide-brim hat, talking into a megaphone while a shirtless man with a clipboard followed her like an unpaid intern. I muttered out loud to nobody. She turned it into a cult. I recorded everything, then made 3 calls. Baird, my lawyer, and the Texas Department of Agriculture's Rural Protection Division, because I suddenly remembered something important. My pond sat under a conservation water grant program, which meant it wasn't just private land, it was protected agricultural infrastructure. And Texas takes agricultural interference the way a bull takes a red flag, personally. By early afternoon, it wasn't just Baird. It was federal vehicles, a state environmental officer, and a rural enforcement marshal with the calm, practiced authority of a man who has ended 1,000 bad ideas. "Ma'am," the marshal told Karen, stepping in front of her megaphone, "you've been formally warned. You are now in violation of federal wildlife protection, agricultural obstruction statutes, and trespass on designated conservation land. Court-issued temporary enforcement order. Vacate immediately." Karen tried the peacefully assembled speech. "You are illegally assembled," he corrected flat. They didn't shout. They didn't pull guns. They documented, body cams, clipboards, portable printer spitting out citation after citation like karma had office equipment. Trespass. Environmental interference. Child endangerment near a protected nest. Unauthorized burning during fire season. It was like watching consequences rain down in slow motion. Tents came down. People scattered. The steel drum guy argued he was offering a public service. The marshal handed him a ticket without even changing expression. Karen stood there, sputtering. "This is a witch hunt." Baird replied calm. "You made it easy." They seized her megaphone. And right when the last car rolled off my land, one officer turned to me and said, almost casually, "By the way, we found forged documentation in the HOA's county submission. They misrepresented your property lines by almost 200 feet. My stomach dropped. "That's felony, right?" He nodded. "Yes, sir." Referred to the state attorney general. That night I sat on my porch with bourbon, watching my security feed, quiet, clean, still, and I had this strange feeling in my chest. Not victory yet. More like the calm before justice finishes tying its boots. Tuesday morning, 2 unmarked sedans pulled into Silver Timber Ranch. Karen was served on her own driveway by a state marshal and county investigator. Charges ranging from document forgery and unlawful interference in land registry filings to willful obstruction of federally protected agricultural land. She tried to record it on her phone. Of course she did, until the marshal calmly told her anything she posted could be used as evidence of intent. That shut her up real fast. I watched the footage later from my camera with a bowl of popcorn. And I'll tell you something, revenge isn't always loud. Sometimes the most satisfying thing in the world is watching the law do its job quietly, efficiently, like a door closing on a bad chapter. Within 48 hours, the HOA board resigned one by one, treasurer, secretary, and a guy named Doug whose job was apparently community drone oversight, which sounds made up, but so did this whole mess. The HOA website went dark. Local news got wind after someone leaked filings. Headline was brutal. HOA president accused of land grab faces felony forgery. I didn't leak it. I didn't deny it either. Then my lawyer filed the civil suit. Trespass, habitat damage, legal fees, defamation, interruption of agricultural cycles, everything. Karen tried a GoFundMe called Protect Our Pond Rights. It raised $600, mostly from a yoga instructor and a guy named Chip. Her attorney withdrew within a week. By the time we hit court, it felt like the ending had already been written. The judge, a middle-aged woman with the tired look of someone who's seen too many HOA cases, didn't even let Karen finish her little speech. "Ma'am," she said dryly, "the United States Department of the Interior, 2 federal agencies, and the state of Texas disagree with you. Unless you have a new constitutional argument, sit down." Verdict: full recognition of my boundaries, private ownership confirmed, HOA found negligent, Karen personally liable for falsification and endangerment. HOA ordered dissolved. Restitution totaled $2.1 million. It wasn't about the money. I used a chunk of it restoring the shoreline, rebuilding one of my barns, putting in a solar irrigation system. But I'll admit, there was something poetic about knowing their clubhouse furniture helped pay for my fence. Karen, she got years. Whether it's 9 or less, I don't know how much a judge can shave off someone's sentence. But I do know this, she finally learned what my granddad used to say: you can't manifest your way out of consequences. A week after, the HOA signs came down. Streets lost their ridiculous names. No more Whispering Fox Circle nonsense. Some residents moved out. A few apologized. A couple brought baked goods like cookies could erase a felony-adjacent cult camp. One guy sat on my porch with me later, quiet, awkward, and admitted, "I didn't realize how peaceful it was out here when it wasn't full of Karens with clipboards." I watched the pond, still reflecting trees, and I felt something settle in me. And here's the thing I learned late, but clear as day now. People don't just steal land with bulldozers. Sometimes they steal it with confidence, with paperwork, with a smile, with a crowd behind them saying, "It feels like ours." Power doesn't always kick down a door. Sometimes it knocks politely and asks you to remove your fence. And if you're not paying attention, if you're too tired, too kind, too willing to keep the peace, you wake up one day and realize somebody turned your home into a timeshare brochure. Now when I sit by that water, I don't see invaders. I see quiet. I see the turtle nest protected. I see the fence line solid, welded shut, signs glowing in the dark like the world's ugliest Christmas decorations. And right above that nest, I put up one custom sign, big red letters, simple as truth. Private property. Trespassing will not be tolerated. Never again. So here's the question that still messes with me. Because it's not as simple as good guy wins, bad guy loses. Where's the line between community and entitlement? Between sharing nature and stealing what isn't yours? And if someone keeps pushing, at what point does standing your ground become too far? And who gets to decide that? Drop your take in the comments. Tell me where you land on it, what you think is right or wrong here. And if you've ever dealt with an HOA, a neighbor, a boss, anybody who tried to rewrite reality and call it cooperation, I want to hear your story.